Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pamela Riccia, unschooling mom and author, bringing you interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free Exploring Unschooling ebook, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hello everyone, I'm Pamela Riccia, and this is episode number 46 of the podcast. It's the 16th of November, 2016, as I record this intro. So in this episode, I chat with Brenna McBroom about growing up unschooling. Brenna is a 27-year-old grown unschooler, and we had a really fun conversation. We talked about her transition from school to homeschooling and eventually to unschooling, finding social connections as a teen, how her passion for ceramic art developed, her experience at Not Back to School camp as both a teen and as staff, and her new blog, Millenimalism. And I really appreciated the conversation we had around young adult unschoolers and how they seem to be self-reliant and living with intention rather than just following societal expectations. I'm really excited for you to listen in. As an update, this week I dove into NaNoWriMo and I'm writing 3,000 words a day. I'd been waiting to get started until after conversation with a developmental editor, which I finally had last Friday and was incredibly fun. I can tie it into unschooling because unschooling is based on how people learn, no matter our age. So I've kind of been watching my foray into fiction writing with an eye on learning. And there were a couple of interesting insights that occurred to me after the call that I thought I'd share. So one was knowing that when I want to learn something new, I like to gather information and just soak things up for a long while, which I've been doing with fiction for a few years now, in little pieces as the kids were younger and with more intention the last year or so. I've talked story tons with Joseph, but this conversation was the first one with someone, quote, in the industry. So you know how you come to unschooling or knitting or hockey or whatever interest, and it has its own language and rhythm. Well, the conversation on Friday flowed very well. I understood what he was saying, he understood me, we laughed, when we talked story for a super fun hour. It was cool to see that I have learned enough so far to be able to engage with people who do this for a living. That was nice confirmation that I'm on the right track. And further proof, like I needed it, that we can learn things well by hanging out with those who are knowledgeable, virtually or in person. The other interesting thing was about my process. I had a plan for this story world and series that I wanted to write, and then in the last month or two, I shifted the story, thinking to make it more appealing to a wider range of readers. And that's the outline that I sent him. And through his comments and our conversation, I'm right back to where I originally started. It was so cool that he independently went to the same place that I was at originally. It was validating and a reminder, like we encourage our children to do, to follow the connections where they lead us, because trying to make them go different places most often just isn't as powerful and as interesting as they naturally would flow. And a big thank you to all the people supporting the show on Patreon. Sometimes just saying thank you to you guys doesn't feel like enough. It is a lot of work to put the show together each week, but I'm really enjoying the challenge, and it means so much to me that you guys enjoy the show enough to contribute where you can. It's super motivating as I brainstorm topic ideas and connect with guests to develop an episode. So thank you. And if you'd like to support the show, even for as little as $1 a month, check out the Exploring Unschooling page at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Exploring Unschooling. So this week in the show, Brenna shares a quote, "You are what you consistently do." And as I was looking for attribution, I found that this concept was shared by Greek philosopher Aristotle way back when he's quoted as saying, "We are what we repeatedly do." I love how that concept ties into unschooling because with unschooling, we don't repeatedly do the things that are expected of us. Instead, we take the time to recognize the options we have and to choose which we think will work best for us. So who we are comes from our soul, from our being. We are unique individuals rather than husks going through the motions that we're told to act out like everyone else. It is this that I love seeing in grown unschoolers. They are living with intention, repeatedly making choices that work for them, even as those choices may change over time. They are the unique and wonderful individuals that they want to be. And I think that is just amazingly beautiful. And now on to the interview with Brenna. Hi everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Brenna McBroom. Hi Brenna.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going great, thank you. Brenna is a ceramic artist, a blogger, a millennial, and has been camper and staff at the Vermont sessions of Not Back to School Camp for years. I'm really excited to dig into Brenna's unschooling experience and hear how all these different threads weave together. So to start, Brenna, can you share with us a bit about you and your family?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're correct. I'm 27. I'm a grown unschooler, and I'm currently living here in Asheville, North Carolina, and working full-time as a ceramic artist. But in the fall, every year for the last 5 years or so, I've been staffing at Not Back to School Camp. And in addition to making pots, I'm also writing a blog right now, and I'm actually also training for a triathlon. Because I'm a glutton for punishment. And I'm the oldest of two. I have a younger brother who's 23, named Logan, and then also we are part of a blended family. So I also have 3 step-siblings who grew up mostly in Texas. But my brother and I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, and grew up very close to some extended family. And so when I was growing up, we were in like the lower grades. We were doing more traditional homeschooling, and we did that alongside my mom's sister and her family. So we were very tight growing up.
Ah, that's cool. So can you talk a bit about what your family's move to unschooling looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I attended the 1st grade in Jacksonville, Florida. And then after that, public school just wasn't a good fit for me. I was kind of an anxious kid. And so the cousins that I just mentioned were already doing sort of traditional homeschooling. And we transitioned when I was about 7 to doing sort of traditional homeschooling. And we did that until I was about 12 years old. And then we were looking at sort of what options were available for high school. And that was a time when a lot of my traditionally homeschooled peers were going back to school. And my mom took the family to, I think, the 2nd annual Live and Learn Unschooling Conference in Columbia, South Carolina. And at the time, I was considering a couple of different options for high school. I was thinking about, I'd been accepted actually into the International Baccalaureate program at a local high school. And then there was also a co-op option at a local homeschooling co-op, but it was very religious. And so we went to the conference and heard Kelly speak and heard Pam Sarushan speak. And I think just kind of felt like, oh, we've found our people here, and this is what we need. This is what we need to be doing. And so ironically, actually, it was I went home from the conference and I had picked up strep throat at the conference. And so I went home and I was pretty sick. And I think that was one of the things that made the transition a little bit easier, because there was this week where it would have been very easy for me to go home and sort of jump back in to what I had been doing and kind of continue on sort of business as usual. But I was just kind of really laid up and on antibiotics. And so had some time to just sort of had some time to think about what I wanted and make this big leap kind of to unschooling. And so that was sort of the beginning of the jump, and then we just sort of ran with it from there.
That's really interesting to hear. And you know what? I think that was the very first conference I went to, too.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because we had started, was it maybe the year before? And I hadn't connected with local unschoolers. So we decided to make the trek down to South Carolina for that one. So that's really interesting. And I love it. It's so true. You said that break, while you were sick gave you some time to actually think things through, right? And see how they felt. Yeah, because or else it's so easy to get caught up in, the next thing and the next thing. And here's what I do, right?
Sure. I have to do this. I need to do that. This is on the schedule. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Without that time to think, I think that is, I found over the years, one of the most valuable things from unschooling is having that time to really think things through and connect to ourselves and see what really makes sense for us personally, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The unschooling lifestyle is definitely an unconventional one, which can sometimes be both awesome and challenging in turn. So I was wondering if you could talk about a challenge that you encountered and how you guys worked through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably one of the biggest challenges once we made that transition was feeling just socially connected to other teenagers in an area where a lot of my friends had gone back to school and the homeschoolers that were around were pretty religious. And I think the way that we worked through that, or the way that I chose to work through that, and my parents sort of helped me with, was just getting very active in the community. So I got trained to be a literacy tutor. I did some political organizing and helped to found a grassroots political network. I did community theater, I did Odyssey of the Mind, and then eventually I discovered Not Back to School Camp and went and attended Not Back to School Camp and felt like I finally kind of found my people, even though it was, a once a year thing. And then we were kind of spread across the country. I had all of these connections after that.
Oh, that's so interesting to hear all the different ways you reached out in your community.
Yeah.
To connect. Yeah. I know Lissy, Michael had found a lot of connection through his dojo, but Lissy did some Girl Guides, and then she really enjoyed helping, with the brownies with the little kids, and then volunteering at the pet shelter and the thrift store. Yeah, it's just
absolutely.
Yeah, finding ways you kind of want to reach out when you're ready for that next step, right?
Yeah, I think something that's really valuable is the ways in which you're able to really get involved in the community and be involved with people of all different ages when you're not in a classroom, 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day as a teenager.
Yeah, that's one of the fascinating pieces too, because once you're out there in the community, it's about connecting with things that you're interested in, right? And age just isn't an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know one of a lady, and a much older lady, retired, who Lissy connected with at the thrift store. Lissy she did a lot of costuming and props and stuff for her photo shoots. And
oh, wow.
The woman was like supplying most of the props to all the local plays and productions, and her husband was a photographer.
Oh my goodness.
So we went to their house to visit. She had her choice of props, and she got old darkroom equipment from them. And it was a wonderful connection and relationship that we never would have found otherwise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I found is that by the time I, by the time I was 18, I had a large group of friends of a variety of different age groups, from, a Potter mentor who was in her 80s to political friends who were, parents in their 40s, and kind of everything in between.
Yeah, I love that. I would also love to know how your passion for ceramic art developed. I was hoping you could share a bit about that journey and what it looks like today for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started when I was about 18. My mom and I actually took a class together at just a local community studio. And I was really excited because I'd done a tiny bit of wheel throwing when I was about 12 and really liked it. And so we signed up for this class, and I was very excited, but I think I kind of didn't anticipate how much I was going to love it and just kind of become obsessed with it a little bit. And so I've always been like a very kinesthetic learner. I've always loved making things with my hands. And so I started doing this, and it just kind of hit home for me. And so I eventually arranged an apprenticeship with a woman up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and went up and worked with her for a little while. And then eventually we moved up to Asheville from Jacksonville, which is a really incredible ceramic arts community and just sort of craft community in general. And when I first got here, I had a wheel and I was making pots kind of on the side and got a job in a restaurant to pay the bills. And then pretty soon after that, I arranged another apprenticeship with a gentleman out in Oregon named Dale Donovan. And I went out and worked with him. And he did something called crystalline glazing, which is this sort of niche glazing technique where you mix the glaze in a certain way and you apply it to the piece, and then you're actually growing crystals in the glaze, two-dimensional crystals, during the firing process.
Wow.
And the thing about doing clay here in Asheville is that it's a very saturated market. They say, when I moved here, people told me you can't throw a stick without hitting a potter. and there's a lot of people doing sort of the same kind of traditional Appalachian stoneware, and it's difficult to stand out. And so I was making pots and selling them some places, but then I went and did this apprenticeship and learned how to do this pretty unique glazing technique. It's kind of tricky, and not a lot of people are doing it. And then I came back to Asheville after that, and pretty quickly, I think within 6 months maybe, I was able to, I started making this new line of work. It looked different from pretty much everything else around here, and then I was able to transition to working full-time as a ceramic artist. And the other thing that happened, the other thing that I did to kind of set myself apart was I started making urns, which is also a pretty niche, unique niche market, which is not a place, if you had asked me as a kid, what do you see yourself doing? I never would have said making cremation urns and crystalline glazing them. But yeah, so that was another way that I sort of managed to set myself apart. And now I actually do a pretty tidy pet urn business online, which is another just super unique. I make these little, lidded jars that are about 60 cubic inches on the inside, and they're perfect for dogs and cats. And I've found that actually people are very happy to pay for just a really nice piece that's a resting place for their pet. So I was going to say one other thing about, So about 4.5 years ago, I started working full-time. I've been working full-time since then. And right now I'm kind of in the middle of show season. You had initially asked if we could talk last week, and I was like, I'm so busy. I have to go do a show this weekend. So I did that and survived, and I have 3 more kind of on the books. This is just because of Christmas. It's just a really busy time of year.
That explains it.
Yeah. So I've got all of these shows stacked up, and I feel like I'm in pretty good shape. I have a lot of inventory, but it's just my last show is December 11th, and then I can kind of breathe a sigh of relief and do some Christmas shopping and hang out with my family.
I really loved hearing all those just little, I wouldn't say dodges, but, a little flick here. Oh, this connection. How did you first hear about the potter in Oregon with that cool glazing technique?
Yeah, it was super interesting. I was traveling in India, and I knew I was working at one session of Not Back to School Camp, because they have a couple of West Coast sessions. So I was working at the first West Coast session, and then I had another engagement at an unschooling conference after a couple of weeks later. And so I had this break, and it didn't make sense for me to fly home. It would have been, and then fly back. It would have been hundreds of dollars, but I didn't want to just hang out for a couple of weeks and on the West Coast. And so I had this time to fill, and I thought, maybe I can connect with somebody who's doing something interesting in clay and work with them. And so I basically was just found him through a Google search, and sent an email and had contacted a couple of different people and kind of didn't think that I would hear back. But I think within 48 hours, he wrote back to me, and I basically had offered to just come and do whatever work he needed done in his studio, kind of like a work trade opportunity. And he asked me to come on out and do work with him, and he walked me through the whole process of crystalline glazing, and I in exchange, I wedged and pugged a lot of clay. I took apart and cleaned his pug mill and put it back together. And then let's see. Oh, and then I organized his gallery at that point as well.
Oh, cool. Just that's one thing a lot of unschoolers get comfortable with is just reaching out and connecting with people, right? And just seeing where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very cool. Next question. The conventional parent-child relationship is often steeped in power and control, but unschooling encourages a different dynamic. Can you share a bit about what your relationship with your parents was like growing up and now as an adult?
Yeah, for sure. So my parents and I have always been really close. We both live in Asheville. I live in South Asheville and they live in North Asheville, but I'm actually at their house right now because this was the most convenient place for me to have fast internet and be able to talk out loud. I could have gone to the library or a cafe, but then it would have been awkward if I had been talking to you. I see them all the time, and really, my mom was the person who kind of brought unschooling to my attention and into our lives. I remember when I was right before we went to that first unschooling conference, I remember we had this conversation where I was thinking really seriously about doing the IB program, the International Baccalaureate program. And it just had a reputation for being very intense. And there was, everyone I knew who had done it just had a lot of homework. They were very busy all of the time. And I remember my mom just sitting down with me at one point and saying, like, you can do this, but I'm afraid that, and I will support you, but I'm afraid that you're not going to have time to do all the things that you like to do. I always had various, projects going when we were homeschooling and just like stuff that I was working on. And I think she was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to keep doing that if I signed up for this program. And so she was really the one who encouraged me to kind of jump on board with unschooling. And then she was also the one who really encouraged, and my stepdad and my dad as well, really encouraged me when I wanted to be a ceramic artist, which was kind of a scary thing just because it's sort of unconventional. Even after you've been unschooling for a while, it's sort of unconventional to say that you want to make pots for a living. And so, I think we just have, I can't say enough positive things about my family and my parents. They're super great.
That is lovely. Yeah. You recently returned from the Vermont session of Not Back to School Camp, a camp for teen unschoolers, if people don't know what it is, and I will share a link in the show notes. You attended as a teen and continued to return as part of the staff. I was wondering if you could share a bit about your experience as a teen camper and what kept you going back.
Yeah, for sure. So I first attended in 2004 when I was 15, and then I attended for 4 years. I think, and then I took a couple of years off, and then I came back as staff in 2011. I think I was junior staff in 2011, and then I've been advising since then. I think it was just really the place that I finally felt connected as an unschooler, and where I really found my tribe, kind of. And the connections that I made as a teenager, I'm still friends with so many of the people that I met as a teenager at Not Back to School Camp. And I actually ended up, I currently live with someone who I met when I was 15 at Not Back to School Camp, my friend Liam Nilsson, here in Asheville. And then, went back as staff and just discovered that that's almost even more fun. I really love working with teenage unschoolers because they're at this age where everything really is open to them. They can do anything that they want, and it's just a really fun age cohort, I think.
And unschoolers are usually generally pretty fun people, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, that's true as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, they just seem very open, I guess maybe is the right word,
Yeah.
Seeking, open to at least conversations, thoughts, they'll think things through rather than jumping to, just the typical answer to anything.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I was looking at your Facebook page that this session you ran a project at the Vermont camp called Deep Dreams, Unearthing, Mapping, and Achieving Your Hidden Ambitions. It sounded super cool, and I was wondering what drew you to that topic, and if you could tell us a little bit about how it went.
Yeah, for sure. So at camp, we have workshops, which are an hour long, and then we have something called projects, which is like a workshop, but it's 6 hours total, and it's spread out over the course of 3 days. So you do 3 2-hour sessions, which is really cool. I love projects because it allows you to just look really deeply into whatever topic you're focusing on. And so people offer projects about a variety of things, like writing comic books or experimenting with color, or I've led projects in the past about acting or starting a small business, starting a small like arts-based business. And so this year I worked with 16 teenage unschoolers on a project that was focused on setting and mapping big goals in your life. So like writing and self-publishing a comic book, or planning a backpacking trip to Germany, or starting a small business selling quilled paper art or something like that, And so during the project, we spent a lot of time working to draft good goals. So taking abstract goals and then making them concrete. So like, for example, if somebody came in with the goal, I want to travel in Europe this year, we worked together to narrow that down to something more specific, like I want to spend 6 weeks in France and Italy in the fall of 2017. And then moving forward, they had this goal that was specific enough that they could actually start working on it. So then we took those goals and did some work with a reverse mapping technique. So starting with the goal and then working backwards through the steps that needed to happen and kind of creating like a full plan for achieving the goal. And then we actually also spent a lot of, I think maybe even we spent half of the workshop talking about impediments to big goals. So working through things like pacing problems. If you have a really big goal and you get very enthusiastic about it and you start and you work and work and work and then kind of burn yourself out, how to overcome things like that. And then procrastination, moving through fear, combating cognitive distortions, and so on and so forth. And I think I was drawn to this topic because I love doing dream mapping and goal setting, and I spend a lot of time doing those things in my own life. And I mentioned earlier my 80-year-old Potter mentor. I had so many great mentors growing up as an unschooler that sort of helped me with the big projects and ideas that I had. And that kind of mentorship was really valuable for me, and I wanted to try to create something similar for these teens that I was working with. And so I'm actually working to develop a similar Skype-based dream mapping program starting tentatively in January 2017. And I'm still working out some of the details at this point, but I'm hoping to offer both a group option, so sort of like the project I did, but maybe capped at 6 people or something like that, and then a one-on-one option for people who want more like individualized attention.
That sounds like lots of fun. What I loved about it was it sounds like what you're doing really is giving some more language to the process.
Yeah.
The way you were talking about, the way you were talking about it, it's stuff that we kind of we do naturally, but like for big projects and big goals, like you say, it can get overwhelming, right? Until you can break it down to actual things, steps that you can take. So I love the way you're giving the whole process kind of a language and steps, and it helps to even walk through just getting started and seeing that you've got a plan, and then again all the issues that can come up, like you talked about procrastination or burnout and all that kind of stuff. So that's super cool.
Oh, thank you.
And speaking of all these different things that you're doing, this year you started a blog called, I'm going to get this right, Millenimalism. Is that right?
Yes, that is right.
Yes. What was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, so it's the blog that nobody can pronounce, and I kind of I kind of realized that that was an issue after I started it. But yeah, it's very much inspired by unschooling, and I think the lifestyle that I see a lot of grown unschoolers leading. So sort of intentional simplicity and minimalism and frugality, coupled with doing work like I'm doing that doesn't always pay well, but you're working on something that you love to do. So I'm working full-time as a potter right now, and one of the ways that I've made that work is by living with other people, utilizing economies of scale, intentionally keeping my living expenses low, things like that. And I think it's a lifestyle that a lot of millennials have kind of had to adopt out of necessity just because of the economic climate that we sort of grew up into. So I see a lot of friends living like this, and then also a lot of grown unschoolers. And so right now I was posting once a week, and then I went to camp and things got kind of crazy with my show season. And so I'm posting not twice a week. I'm posting every 2 weeks right now. And it's been going well. It feels like it's kind of noisy out there. Like the blog market is kind of saturated, but it's just been kind of a passion project that I've been enjoying working on.
Yeah, I love the, I think intention is a big word around it, right? Because these are choices that you're making. And, when you realize that they are your choices, then you don't feel, like you're being judged or a failure, because they are different choices than other people have made. And you mentioned some millennials are kind of, if they're feeling forced to live that way because of the economy and the environment that they're finding themselves in, that can make things a lot harder, right? When they're feeling like, oh, I'm a failure because this isn't working. Yeah. But when you're intentionally making these choices, it can be very awesome, right? This is the way you want to live.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got some great articles there. So I encourage people to check it out. What stands out for you as you look back on your unschooling years? For example, from your perspective now, what do you most appreciate about living an unschooling lifestyle growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was thinking about this question, and I started thinking about this quote, and I'm not sure who said it, but there's this quote, "You are what you consistently do." And I think about that a lot in relation to unschooling, because I think that having a self-directed education has turned me into a self-directed adult. And so I feel like I can teach myself anything or find the resources that I need to learn anything. And I really, as an adult, I think take pride in figuring things out for myself. So whether that's like, my car headlight went out and I don't want to pay $60 to go to the mechanic, I can like go on YouTube and go to the auto parts store and, figure out how to replace it, for example. And I think that one reason that I've been successful running a small business is that as an unschooler, I'm sort of used to flying by the seat of my pants and just like playing whack-a-mole and dealing with challenges as they come up. So for one example, I work as a potter and I throw pots and trim them and glaze and fire them. But I've also, over the course of starting this business, I've had to learn how to do a whole bunch of other things like, file for a sole proprietorship or rewire my kiln, for example. I have this kiln, and something that happens is every so often, every 6 months or so, I have to change like the elements inside, like the electrical wiring that actually heats up. And so, it was very intimidating when I first started because there are wires involved in electricity and, needle nose pliers. And so that was something that I just kind of had to figure out for myself. And I just continue to feel like excited and empowered by like figuring things like that out and learning to do them. And yeah. And also things like, pay sales taxes and design a booth and things that you maybe wouldn't consider super exciting, but that are necessary parts of running a business like this.
Yeah, it sounds, the phrase that came to mind was self-reliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, just a confidence that for whatever comes up, you'll figure something out. You don't know what it will be. And for our last question, as a grown unschooler, what piece of advice would you like to share with unschooling parents who are just starting out on this journey?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, so I feel like I'm not a parent at this point, so I, don't have firsthand experience or perspective on that. But as a grown unschooler, I think the way that I mostly interact with kids these days is they come into my booth when I'm selling stuff at a craft show. And most of these kids aren't unschooled. And something that I see a lot is parents just being very, very controlling of their kids. Like, put that down, don't touch this, back away, or, things not even related to like what's going on in the booth. Just a lot of pretty controlling behavior. And I will just say that I've never had a child break something in my booth, but I have had several adults break things when they come in my booth. Kids come in and they're usually very, very careful because their parents are often kind of complaining at them about it. And so I think the piece of advice that I have is that if you can work on relaxing your need to control things even a little bit, it helps to move you in the right direction of unschooling, and it helps to improve the relationship that you have with your child. Because I think that that's the big difference I see, is that sometimes parents come in and, I see this good relationship between them and their children, and I see them really working with their children rather than trying to control them.
Yeah, that is such a fascinating point because, as you're saying, you haven't had kids break things. I imagine parents jump in with control because they don't think their kids know, but kids are really can definitely be attuned to what's going on around them. And when we jump in and control, we take that power away from them, don't we? Because if they would be going in and being careful on their own, but we snatch that from them when we tell them that they have to do this and they have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. 99% of the kids who come in they're already being careful, but then they're getting this negative feedback from their parents as though they're misbehaving or doing something wrong. Yeah. And sometimes it's kids who are quite old, kids who are, 11 or 12 or 13, who certainly, already have the self-control and, maturity to be able to come in and interact with me as an adult, kind of.
Yeah, and when you look at it from their perspective, being told that when they're already doing that, it's like, I imagine it, they don't feel seen because it's like, well, can't you tell I'm already doing that?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool because that is a great first step. And one of the things that when parents are coming to unschooling, to be able to open up and start to release some of that control and start to see their kids for what they're actually doing, that's a huge piece of deschooling. So that's very, very cool.
Oh, thanks.
Great. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, Brenna. I really enjoyed this peek into your life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was wonderful to talk to you. I really appreciate the invitation.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. And before we go, where's the best place for people to connect with you online?
Oh, well, you can check out my website, which is brennadee.com, BRENNADEE.com. And then email is probably the best place if you want to actually connect with me, which is just Brenna McBroom, so my first name and my last name, @gmail.com.
Excellent. I will share that in the show notes and your blog link as well.
Oh,
thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. You can also get your free Exploring Unschooling ebook at livingjoyfully.ca/exploring unschooling. If you'd like to connect, you can also find me on Facebook at Living Joyfully. Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.